And I do want to say, first of all, thank you to Jerry and Dawn and everyone else who put this together for inviting me. I normally talk about mental health and neuropsychological findings in Fabry disease, or the Fabry Fog, and what we know about that, and the research that has and is being done. And I am going to talk about that today. But I rewrote this about 5 times in the last 2 days and found that it was really impossible to talk about either mental health or cognitive functioning in the year 2020 without talking about the impact of COVID. And I don't mean the impact on your brain of getting COVID, but the impact of living and worrying and trying to concentrate on what you're doing and coping during a pandemic. It has an impact on both your mental health and your cognitive abilities. So after we talk about the Fabry Fog, I am going to talk about the impact of COVID. So let's see, I need to, there we go. Okay, so the Fabry Fog. Normally this is the part, and many of you have heard me talk about this in the past at various places, and this is the part where normally I ask for a show of hands. So given that we're all virtual at the moment, I realize that you may not be able to do a show of hands, but you can do them at home if you want to. So how many of you who have Fabry have noticed difficulty paying attention at times, or difficulty concentrating, or difficulty finding the word that you want? All of the things that I just mentioned are things that I'm having increasing difficulty doing, and I don't have Fabry. But they are also things that in the 10 years that I've worked with Dawn at Emory, that the people I've had the good fortune to meet who do have Fabry have shared with me that they have some difficulties with. Not everyone, but enough people that I started to sit up and pay attention and say, hey, what's going on here? How many of you have had difficulties with memory? Or what we call executive functioning. And by that I mean planning, organizing, abstract thinking, other cognitive functions that go on in the frontal lobe of your brain. And some of us, me in particular, have said, you know, I'm getting older. Some of the things I'm noticing are because I'm getting older. So how do you know what is due to normal aging and what might be due to Fabry, or what might be due to living with Fabry? We don't know what might be part of the disease or what might be part of reacting to living with a chronic progressive disease. So the term that many of you shared with me was the Fabry Fog. So that's what I started to call it. And I'm going to go over a brief summary. So there is, at first, the initial studies that were done looking at neuropsychological impact in Fabry were contradictory and a little confusing. They either didn't have enough subjects in the study, or they didn't have enough of both men and women, or only the men had had strokes, which was a confound, or they only used a brief measure of cognition. So the type of measure that you might give to someone who you suspected of dementia. And the type of symptoms that many of you shared with me about your Fabry were not the kind of symptoms that you could pick up with a measure looking at something as impactful as dementia. So initial studies were a little contradictory, but as time has gone on, bigger and better studies have come out, and there does seem to be some initial evidence from studies done in Denmark, in the Netherlands, in Australia, in the past 3 to 4 years that suggest a possible impact on attention, psychomotor speed, information processing, which I don't seem to have written down on the slide, and executive abilities, and that's the planning and the abstract thinking that we talked about a few moments ago. It's important in doing research, and research is continuing on this topic in different places around the world, including here in the US, and I'll mention more on that in a second. It is important to use in-depth neuropsychological batteries. So it's not something that can be done over a half an hour. It's something that is going to take a longer amount of time to really probe for the more subtle differences that people may be experiencing. The other thing that's come to light from the recent studies is that subjective reports of cognitive functioning, that is how you feel you're doing with your attention, your memory, your executive abilities, don't always match objective scores. Sometimes the subjective reports in one study in particular, it seemed that, and this was a study coming out of the Netherlands, it seemed that subjective reports were more correlated with level of depression than with objective scores of deficits. So we are continuing to research that and see what we can learn. A couple recommendations just from what we have learned so far are, and I have had the fortune of meeting a number of you, and I know that some of you have had neuropsychological testing either in the past or for various other reasons. If you have a baseline measure of your neuropsychological functioning, your cognitive abilities, that is a wonderful thing, because you can then repeat it over time to see whether or not changes in your cognitive abilities match those we would expect due to getting older, or whether they don't match what we would expect due to getting older. The other thing that I would recommend, and that I have heard particularly Dr. Heather Lau recommend, and some of the other incredible speakers that we've already heard from today, are regular assessment for things that affect our cognitive abilities. So depression and anxiety affect our ability to pay attention and to concentrate. And as she said, as Dr. Lau said, if we're not paying attention or able to concentrate, then we can't encode things, memories, and so then we can't retrieve those memories. Medication can also sometimes have side effects which impacts our cognitive abilities. Stroke, chronic pain, as she mentioned. There are a number of things that when you're looking at your cognitive abilities, you want to be sure to get a complete workup for. The other thing that I would recommend is that you work with someone who can suggest well-known techniques for coping with impairments in cognitive ability. We don't necessarily have any way to reverse, for example, the impact of a stroke, but there are well-known techniques that can help you adjust and compensate for the impact of a stroke or other measures. A health psychologist or a neuropsychologist can help teach you some of these things, as well as discussing coping behaviors. There was a recent study that just came out, again, this was in the Netherlands, that suggested that some of the impact on depression in Fabry was correlated with use of coping behaviors. And if we know depression can impact your cognitive abilities, then those are worth taking a look at as well. And then simply getting help for anxiety and depression. Okay, so we are doing a study here in the US. We have had 59 people enroll in it. We're hoping for 80 participants. Enrollment did slow down due to COVID, but we are testing, and that I am the neuropsychologist doing the study. It's for all adults 18 and up. It's here at Emory, and it's about 10 to 12 hours of testing, taking into account age, gender, depression, stroke, disease severity, and treatment status. If you have not participated and you're interested, you can either email me or email Dawn. As she said, we work together. All right, so let's turn to the effects of the pandemic on our cognitive abilities. Is it possible that we can have both pandemic brain and the Fabry Fog? Yes, it is possible. Difficulty coping with 2020 and all the things that have occurred in our country and around the world in 2020 has contributed to another reason for depression and anxiety and difficulty sleeping and impacts on our job, on our work, on home, and all of these things impact our cognitive abilities as well. So let's talk about that a little bit. How many of you have heard the term pandemic fatigue? A number of you. Yeah. Many of us are struggling. And I regret that you can't see my face and that I can't see all of yours. I wish we were in person right now. And it is precisely because we cannot gather in person that many of us are struggling. We thought when this started that things would be back to something resembling normal in a couple of weeks, maybe 2 months at the outset. And so almost everybody buckled down and did what we needed to do while our country went into various stages of lockdown, depending on where we live. And we sort of thought that it would be over and done with by now. Surely it would be done by the end of the summer. Surely we wouldn't be going into this in the fall. And yet we're still here. And part of the challenge is that previously in your family or at work or wherever you congregated, if one person got fatigued, another person could step in and take the reins for a little bit, could take the lead. So maybe my husband could take the lead at home, or maybe Dawn took the lead. She always is in the lead, but maybe someone else took the lead at work. And when that person got fatigued, the person who was resting could step back in and take over again. But right now, everybody is fatigued. And some people have experienced the loss of their job, social isolation, challenges with childcare, virtual schooling. Some people have experienced the death of their loved ones, and general uncertainty. And that's not even to mention the systemic racism and the terrible deaths that have shone a spotlight on that during the year 2020. Once again, I was part of a webinar this morning conducted by the Fabry International Network. And in addition to myself, they had a wonderful gentleman from Belgium who walked everyone through some mindfulness exercises, some meditation and some breathing. And those are really important. I've talked about those in some Fabry gatherings in the past. I'm not going to go into them now, but I would encourage you to look them up and to try them. Everyone reacts a little bit differently. Some people seem to be able to naturally withstand adversity. But even those who seem on the outside to be doing okay are often not quite as put together on the inside. The important thing to know is that mental health challenges are normal. They were normal before COVID, and they're normal now. And that this too will pass. Even though it seems like it's going on forever, this too will pass. So two people can be exposed to the same event, but experience the event in vastly different ways. And for some, what one person may brush off as not stressful at all may trigger in another person past events and past emotions. Most of us experience some level of varying emotions or have experienced this year, such as anxiety, anger, feeling overwhelmed, and/or depression. And that is completely normal. It is normal to have worried about your own health and the health of your loved ones. It's normal to have felt a change in your sleeping, which has an impact on our cognitive abilities, a change in our eating, which has an impact on our cognitive abilities, to have had difficulty concentrating, or maybe to have had an increased use of alcohol or smoking or other things that we turn to for stress. Many of us are staying at home for a lot longer than we used to be, experiencing new challenges in parenting, work, relationships, maybe even recovering from the virus itself. So I want to talk about some techniques to help with mental health that will in turn help with neuropsychological functioning. I also want to acknowledge these last two bullets. This is a slide from Jennifer Yeager. Her name is down there at the bottom. I don't know if you can see it. But I want to acknowledge the last two bullets that she has on here in particular. In-depth processing of trauma happens years later when we feel emotionally safe to deal with it. It doesn't always happen in real time. A lot of us have experienced trauma in the past, and a lot of us have gone through traumatic things this year. When you're in the midst of trauma, just getting by emotionally and functionally is okay. That is the goal, just to put one foot in front of the other and get by. Lowering what may have been your previous expectations of yourself and being kind to yourself and others is vital. It's okay to grieve, not just for those who have died during this time, not just sending good wishes or prayers to those who are struggling at this time, but also grieving things that maybe we think are silly in comparison, and yet they're not. The loss of our vacations, our canceled trips, maybe our baby showers, maybe your graduation. We held a virtual graduation here at Emory in the spring. Maybe your child's birthday party, your wedding, your birth plan. My sister gave birth this past May. I have not seen my new niece yet. My stepmother, my sister's mother, sat in the car in the parking garage outside the hospital because she was not allowed to go in to see her granddaughter born, and she was worried. So she sat there all day because that was as close as she could be. It's okay to grieve the loss of your paycheck and your freedoms. And it is possible to feel so many emotions at the same time that you don't know what to do with them. That is normal as well. We can feel grateful that we are alive, grateful that we can congregate, grateful to Jerry and Dawn and everybody else who has put this webinar together, that we are able to see each other and learn, and that the technology exists for us to do this when a pandemic occurs. And yet we can still be disappointed about things being canceled, about the fact that we're not in person right now, as we normally are at this time of year, and that we can't give each other all the hugs we normally give. We can celebrate the fact that we get extra time with our families, and yet also feel completely overwhelmed by their 24/7 presence. I love my children, but there are times when I need a break from them. Yes, we can be hopeful and simultaneously still feel like things are falling apart. And yes, we can be a source of support for others and also recognize that we need to prioritize our own needs and fill our own cup and take care of ourselves. About the anger that I mentioned, it is really normal to feel that anger, and it is totally okay. Maybe it's just irritability at others who are under our roofs 24/7. Or maybe it's anger that other people haven't followed preventative guidelines the way you felt they should. Or maybe it's anger that other people are telling you how to follow preventative guidelines in a way that you don't want to. Or maybe it's just anger that all of this is happening at all and that someone you know and loved has died as a result of it. We don't have control over other people. And yet it is totally normal to be angry. The key is not to take that anger out on each other, not to take that anger out on those we love, those who are around us. It is helpful to relinquish trying to control things that we don't have any control over, and instead focus on that which we do. It is helpful to stick to a routine. Many of us have a new routine. Many of us have had to carve one out. Try to go to sleep and wake up at reasonable hours, or at least whatever your reasonable hours were before now. Make a schedule for yourself, including work and self-care. As tempting as it might be, don't stay in your pajamas. Even when you're on Zoom, put pants on, get showered, wash your face, brush your teeth, get dressed for the day just as you would have before COVID. Build breaks into your day. If you're still trying to function at work, take a 5 to 10 minute break for every hour that you've worked, whether that's playing music. My personal favorite is to go and snuggle my cat, taking deep belly breaths, lighting a candle. I don't know if you can see all of these, sitting in nature. Some of them you can't do in 5 to 10 minutes, but when you can put a break in your day, do. Finding really creative ways to socialize daily and safely. I know Dawn is the queen of creativity, and she has found many creative ways to socialize daily and safely. Focusing on optimism, kindness, and gratitude. It sounds hokey, it sounds like a cliche, but participating in little acts of kindness and focusing on gratitude has tremendous benefits for our physical and our mental health. And that in turn has tremendous benefits for our cognitive health. Getting up and moving around a little each day. Don't sit in front of the computer. Well, okay, this weekend, sit in front of the computer. But other than this weekend, try not to sit in front of the computer or on your couch all day. If you can, safely go outside for a walk. Watch YouTube videos. Whatever you want to do, dance around your kitchen. Get some movement in there. Reach out to others. This is a photo of my youngest doing kindergarten in the spring. She's now in first grade. People have gotten really creative. Pandemic pods, pandemic bubbles, all the things that you can do to reach out to each other. And when you're doing that, don't forget the kids. We have virtual play dates over Zoom now at my house. This particular little girl who you see in the picture can spend 2 hours with her friends over Zoom on an iPhone, and she'll just carry it around with her, and they'll play with their toys in their respective rooms, and they're perfectly happy. They're really loud. They seem to think you have to shout over the computer or iPhone, but they're happy, and they need that too. And then there's all the stuff that your doctors regularly tell you, and it may seem obvious, but staying hydrated and eating well. Stress and eating often don't mix well. We either overeat or we forget to eat or whatever. We forget to stay hydrated. Developing a self-care toolkit. One of the things that I loved that the Fabry International Network did this morning, they had a webinar about a month ago, and they assigned homework to everyone who came. And the homework was to send in 2 to 3 of your own self-care toolkit tips. And then they went over them this morning, things that helped them personally. And the goal is to build your own self-care toolkit from everybody else's ideas of things that work for you. Some things won't work for you. One woman said that cleaning was incredibly therapeutic to her. And I've had a student in the past. I assign this to my students every year because grad school is also stressful. I ask them to build a self-care toolkit. And I've had students who've told me now and then that cleaning is therapeutic. I personally don't find that therapeutic. But if it works for you, that's what matters. Sunshine does have proven scientific benefits for depression. Journaling, putting structure in your day. These are some of the tips from this morning. Kindness to yourself and others, positive thoughts and self-talk, plants, chai latte. I'm reading off their list at the moment. Find out what makes you happy. A soft blanket or a stuffed animals. Again, we don't want to forget the children because they're really important and they need this too. Hot chocolate, a small swing or a rocking chair, a hammock, a coloring book, bubbles to blow, whatever it is that helps you and or your kids relax when you're stressed. And speaking of kids, if you have children, children make sense of things through play. You may have heard the term play therapy before. It's a type of psychological approach to working with kids. But even when they're not in therapy, kids just process things through playing. So right now, you'll see them doing things that may be concerning to you, or maybe you saw them doing things in March or April that were concerning, and now they've moved on. I remember in April, one of my little girls, I looked in and she was playing with all her stuffed animals, and they were lying on the floor, and I said, "Oh, what are they doing?" And she said, "Oh, they all got COVID and died." And I said, "Oh, okay. What are you doing?" "Well, I'm saving them all." And this was her way of processing things. And to kids, death is not a concept that they necessarily always understood. So it made sense to her that they'd all died, but she was going to be the doctor and save them anyway. And that's okay. I want to encourage you as a parent not to freak out if your kid does or says something in play that seems concerning like that, but instead to get down and talk to them about what's going on and how they see things, and see if they have any questions about anything, and maybe play with them, with the dolls and things. And most importantly, to build connection with them, following their lead. Lots of hugs, lots of play, because that's the way they think, and verbal reassurances, telling them that you're there with them. There are many things you can do to support your kids, and I don't have enough time to talk about them all today, but I want to encourage us when we think about our coping to also think about our little ones. Moving on, it's really important to give everyone the benefit of the doubt. Right now, a lot of us are not at our best. Every person will have moments when they're doing well and moments when they are not at their best. It's important to assume that everyone's doing the best that we can, and to always assume good intentions, even if you don't understand why someone is behaving the way they are behaving. They may have a different coping style. Their style may be anger, while yours may be reading a book. Their style may be not talking about what's going on in the world, while your style may be a need to talk about and process what's going on. Sometimes these things work together well, and sometimes we just push each other's buttons. And the best thing we can do is just forgive each other and forgive ourselves, because you don't want to lose a relationship that means a great deal to you, just because you're under stress and they are too. Speaking of forgiving people, I want to go back to the idea of being kind to ourselves. I was never perfect before COVID, and I definitely have not gotten better at that since COVID. We are, many of us, all doing too many things at once, under stress and under a lot of different circumstances than we were ever used to. Let's give ourselves some grace and acknowledge that we are all doing the best we can. And extend this kindness to our little ones as well. Because the thing about the kids is that sometimes they seek our attention by misbehaving. And sometimes they're misbehaving because they're stressed. But we want to be kind to ourselves and be kind to them as well. It is okay not to be at our best right now. And let me just add that when we do start to return, and some of you may be already starting to return to normal, whatever normal is, everyone's going to do it at their own pace. Some people are going to be comfortable jumping right back into what they were always doing, and some people will not. There may take some time for people to be comfortable being in large crowds again, for people to feel comfortable eating in a crowded place, or hugging people, even though we want it. For some people, it may take a little time, and we need to anticipate that and give them grace, give them kindness and time. All right, limiting social media and COVID conversations. Sometimes we just need a break from watching, reading, or listening to the news, hearing about the pandemic, hearing about a lot of things in our country right now can be upsetting, no matter what your perspective is on any of it. You want to get the news, you want to know what's going on, maybe, some people don't, but a lot of the information out there is either sensationalized, negatively skewed, or alarmist. I would encourage you to find the few trusted news sources that you trust, that you can check in consistently, but limit it to a certain amount of time a day. So maybe you check for 20 minutes to 30 minutes each day, just to keep abreast of what's happening. and then go do something else for the rest of the day. Because how many of you are familiar with the term now of doom scrolling? Doom scrolling, especially in the morning or at night, is when you cannot stop checking social media, be it Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever it is that you may follow. And you just see all the negative things and you can't stop watching them. And if you do that first thing in the morning and late at night, particularly late at night, so first thing in the morning, you're setting your day off with that particular tone. Late at night, you may have difficulty going to sleep afterwards. And sleep is critical for our cognitive abilities and our daily functioning. So no doom scrolling. Limit that as much as you can. Notice the good in the world. Many of us of a certain age here in the United States grew up watching Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. And you've probably seen this meme before. It's pretty common now. He said when he was a boy and he would see scary things in the news, his mother would say, "Look for the helpers. You will always find people who are helping." So in the midst of all the doom scrolling, there are also a ton of stories about people sacrificing and donating and supporting one another in miraculous ways. I see them in person and I hear about them from other people. And sometimes there's small kindnesses and sometimes they're pretty large. And it's important for our sanity, for our mental health, to counterbalance all the heavy information with the hopeful information. Speaking of being a helper, it really does help us to find even a tiny way to help others. It makes us feel useful. It makes us feel meaningful. Whether that might be supporting a particular store that you want to help not go out of business, a local mom and pop shop, or checking in on each other. Again, some people who seem okay aren't on the inside. Or maybe just taking some time to write a letter or speak to someone you haven't spoken to in a long time. There are a million ways to help each other. Working on a long-term project. A lot of people have taken up projects, and those are great. Not least for the fact that there's something to keep us busy and distracted and engaged, to take breaks from what's going on in the outside world. Our emotional brain is very receptive to creativity, and it's a direct portal for releasing our feelings. Another technique that we use with kids and adults in psychology is the creative arts, drawing, dancing, music, singing, playing. It's a very effective way of getting kids especially, but also we adults, to get things out of our system. And of course, because things seem so absurd sometimes in the world today, finding something to laugh at every day. Whether it's cat videos on YouTube, or your favorite comedian, or a funny movie on Netflix, or whatever. Something to bring a smile and laughter into your day. Breaking it down. This is something that I suggest to my students when they're overwhelmed, but it's also really good outside of school, especially right now when it's hard to predict what the future is going to be like. So we want to break time down into smaller pieces, focusing on the present, focus on the now. I had a friend recently who invited me to do something wonderful next summer. And I really want to do it. But my sanity cannot handle planning for next summer right now. I just can't look that far into the future. For other people, Planning something next summer might give them something to look forward to. And that's really helpful as well. So knowing yourself and what works for you is critical. For those of you like me who can't think that far ahead, breaking things down into the next week, the next month, the next whatever chunk of time seems doable to you is good. And reaching out for help when you need it. As we said, it can be helpful to someone else when we help them. When we reach out for help, we're also giving them that opportunity. Keep up with your medications. If you're having difficulty coping, now is a great time to reach out to a mental health professional. If your children are having coping, your children's teachers and related service providers will do almost anything within their power to help. And right now, teachers are trying their best. They may not be getting it right, but they are trying their best, just like all the rest of us. Reminding yourself that, again, this is temporary. While it might seem that it won't end, it is temporary. It's a season of life, and it's going to pass. And we will return to feeling free and safe and busy and connected in all the days ahead. And I want to close by reminding you of what you already know, which is that you are more than your Fabry. You are more than this pandemic. You are more than any cognitive impairments you may be having. You are a valuable human being who is a friend, maybe a dog or a cat lover, maybe a student, a neighbor, a spouse, a child, a creative person, and all the other wonderful things that you are. So my talk today ended up being very different from the type of talk that I have given many times in the past at these gatherings. But most of you, a good deal of you, have heard me talk in the past, and you know what I normally talk about. And I will talk about it again in the future. But today I felt like I could not talk about mental health and cognitive functioning without talking about mental health and cognitive functioning during COVID. So I want to thank you for your time, and I will stop there.
Thank you, Nadia. You absolutely have to take a look at the comments that went on during your talk. Woo, I'm very bright now.
I don't know how to do that.
Well, so at the bottom, you'll see something says chat. And if you just scroll through, you will be amazed at how much you touched people in your talk.
Thank you. Maybe if I turn off my screen, it will show me the chat. I don't know.
Maybe so. Yeah, sometimes if you scroll down towards the bottom of your screen, you can see the toolbar pop up.
Am I still sharing?
Yeah, your girls just popped up.
Oh, these are my girls. I have 2 boys and 2 girls. The boys are grown and out of the house. Dawn, can you stop my screen? Because I don't know how to stop sharing.
Let's see if I can make it. I think maybe if I do mine.
I can tell Nadia how to.
Well, no, she's not able to do it. All right.
If she goes into share screen settings, she can turn it off.
I know. All right, I'm going to share my screen randomly.
And that'll probably kick me out.
That's what I'm thinking. Did it do it?
I don't know. What do you guys see?
I don't know. I see my screen. Okay, so check the bottom of yours, see if you can see.
I don't. I'm afraid I don't. But if there are any questions, please let me know.
We'll be able to download it.
Okay.
Hold on. Jacob says he knows best.
Hi, Jacob.
Hey.
Thank you for bailing me out here, Jacob. As I said, my computer's been giving me trouble today. It worked for the Finn webinar, but it's not working for this one.
Boom. He does know best. Look at that smart boy.
Thank you, Jacob.
Yay, 13-year-old sons who've been doing Zoom for school 12 hours a day.
13.
13-year-old, sorry. No, you haven't been in school for 13 hours a day. Anyway, you guys, I would like to tell you that Dr. Nadia Ali's secret word is Fabry Fog. So if you will put Fabry Fog and your first and last name into the chats, that will get you in the drawing. And you can be in the drawing for the fabulous gift card prize. And Nadia, what I'm going to do is they download all the comments and I will make sure you see them. Unless you can see them now. You might be able to see them now if you look through the chat.
I can, and they're making me cry. So
Right? I was like,
everybody.
you need to read all of these because
Thank
you made them cry. So it was perfect. It's what everybody needed and it was wonderful.